Hello?
Hi,
How you doing?
good, how are you?
I'm excellent. Can you see me?
Um, Let me see, not several people, so I'm not sure where you are. Are you LG Stylo?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay, so we'll be started shortly. We'll wait a few minutes um, for everyone to join, for more people to join in.
Okay.
And then we do ask that you mute your microphone if you can. Um, and then you can unmute if you have a question, or you can also enter in any questions in the chat option. Um,
How many people is it?
I think we had over 40 people register. Um, All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and then people can just catch up as they join in. So welcome. So this is the Supporting the Development of Children with Disabilities at Home workshop. I am Sandra Venegas, and with me I have some students. I'm at Texas State University, and this workshop is being presented under the Aspen Research Program. We have some more information that we can share with you about that at the very end. So just so you have an idea of who we are, so as I mentioned, I'm Sandra Venegas. I'm an assistant professor at Texas State University. And with me, I have three students, Christopher Lee, Stephanie Soto Zamudio, and Mariana Davila. And they are all graduate students at Texas State University who will also be joining me in this workshop. Before we get started though, please feel free to enter any or type in any questions you may have in the chat. It will be moderated by one of my students. And then we'll also have some time at the end for questions if you have additional concerns or anything that we didn't address. So at the end, so after we conclude this workshop, we will be sending out a PDF of the presentation slides, as we do have some links to some great resources. So you'll have access to that after the workshop today. All right, so today what we plan to talk about was just some very brief activities at home that you can do to promote child development. We'll talk about some common behavioral challenges at home, as well as some practical strategies you can do to address some of those behavioral challenges. And then finally, we'll conclude with some resources and supports that can be helpful, especially during COVID-19. And we also will have time for Q&A or some questions, some discussion at the end. So as I mentioned, if you do have questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat option. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So one of the key things that we that we try to stress in terms of promoting is that is to really take advantage of those daily routines, right? So we know that we're often doing a lot of different types of activities with our children with disabilities, and all of these different routines that we're doing with them are ways that we can highlight different strategies, highlight different kinds of things we want them to learn. So for example, with story time, this is a key time to talk about different objects, different actions, different emotions. This can also be a time where you can practice how you would handle different situations. You can act out those situations with your child. We also know that many children with disabilities or children in general really enjoy music. So this would be a good opportunity to really have like a positive interaction with children, talking about the lyrics of a song, and even getting in some of that physical activity that we know is really important. When we're watching TV or even watching videos, we can use this opportunity to talk about what is going on, what are the characters, what are the situations that are happening, and then we can also, even during meals, we can use this time to talk about the nutrients that are in the food, the different kinds of food that we're eating, the textures, the colors, the smells. So those are all different opportunities that we can take advantage of to talk about things, have the child share their perspective on these issues. And these are just more broadly some daily routines that can be helpful. When we're thinking about language development or communication development, we can also think about how can we improve their language, right? How can we get them to talk more or use more appropriate language? So one of the key things that we can do during daily routines or even at home is to model language, really show the child what kind of language we want them to be using. We know that any words that they're using are often, even though they may not be appropriate or maybe not the right words to use, they're still trying to communicate in some way. So in terms of modeling language, we can sort of fill in that gap and then give meaning to the child. So if we know that they're trying to say the word, provide that model of what the actual word is that we want to say. We can also adjust our language. So we know that many children with disabilities, sometimes it may take them a little bit more time to process the information. So keeping that in mind, so using simple language, using gestures or visual cues to help them understand what you're referring to or what you're talking about. Just speaking slowly and putting more stress on words that are important or words that we want them to learn, and to be repetitive. So we know that repetition is usually the better way to learn. So the more that they hear it, the more likely they are to learn what that word means and be able to use that word. And then another approach would be to also model language that's around the child's interest. So if we know that they're really interested in cars, then we can talk about cars, use language that's related to cars or trucks or, that kind of area. So then the child is motivated to learn more about it as they're already interested in that. So as I mentioned before, we can really use daily routines as a way to model new vocabulary or even more appropriate sentence forms. So during meal times, we can model how do you ask politely for someone to pass the napkin. During bath time, we can talk about different body parts and shapes and things like that. And then during shopping, I know that may be a little bit more limited at the moment, but even if you're going to the grocery store with your child, talking about the different different items, having them select certain things, or even thinking about the colors that are in their environment can be helpful. So we don't just want to model language, we also want our children to expand their language, right? We want them to learn more, to talk more, to use more language in communication. So we can expand on their language by really thinking about where are they in terms of their language. So are they just using single words? Are they just using gestures to communicate? Or are they more advanced in using longer phrases or full sentences? So when we're expanding language, we can model the language that's just one step above. So we don't want to make it too hard for the child, but just a little bit more challenging so that they can build on what they already have. So in this example, if a child is just using single words to communicate, then one thing we can do is use 2-word phrases. So it's easier for the child to then just add 1 word to what they're already saying, versus if we try to give them a long sentence with a lot of information, that may be too hard for them to understand and to build up to. When we're thinking about language, some other pieces that are important are that we know that children communicate not just with verbal language, such as spoken speech, but they also communicate in nonverbal ways. So this can be with facial expressions, with gestures, and these are also great ways to expand on their communication. So if they're just using gestures, we can then just add a single word, and we can recognize that that's a form of communication that they're using. So one other area that I think is a great way to really promote child development at home is to promote reading. So we know that reading can look very differently for a lot of different children as well as different families. So it's important to think about reading as, very, very broad. So reading can look very different. So it doesn't just have to be about reading storybooks. It can be just reading newspapers, reading, things online, reading to a younger sibling. So maybe having them read a story to them. It may not even have to be a book with words. It can just be a book with pictures. So having them come up with a story that corresponds with different pictures can be a great way to promote reading. We know for many families, reading religious texts is part of their weekly routines. So this could be a great way to promote reading. And we also know that translating for family members is another great way to encourage reading or encourage learning about words and learning about language. To make this a much more family kind of event or a type of activity, one thing that we can do is really tap into the interests and expertise of the different family members. So for example, if you have a family member that has a great garden, maybe having them talk about what it means to plant their flowers and what goes into all of that process, right? So we can think about other kinds of interests or even professions that a person may have in the family and talk about that, and encouraging those conversations between the child and the adult. So these are great ways to kind of foster that interest and curiosity in different areas for the child. So next we'll move on to some of the common behavioral challenges at home. And I'll pass on the presentation over to Christopher Lee, and he'll go more into detail about some challenges that you may have experienced with your child at home, or you maybe have seen in other children.
Hi, I'm Christopher Lee. I'm going to go over the common behavioral challenges at home. Next slide, please. Okay. To start off, to better understand behavior, we look at the ABC model. The ABC model is just an acronym for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. They're big words, but it simply breaks it down to antecedent, meaning what was happening before the behavior happened. Behavior is like what is happening currently, and then consequences is what happened afterwards. And the way we use this model to analyze behavior and to understand behavior is your child being difficult or meltdown because of a previous reason, and that would be the antecedent. As we go over these in the future slides, as for the challenging behaviors, most of these would be antecedents that we can consider that lead up to difficult or challenging behaviors. And then later talk about the things that you do within the antecedent or the consequence that can help manage that behavior. Next slide, please. So first thing I want to talk about is attention problems. The most common thing when people think of attention problems is maybe the child has ADHD, which is a mental health condition that can cause abnormal levels of hyperactivity and impulsive behaviors. Typically, there is a diagnosis by like the DSM-5, which is like the psychology manual. But that is not the only reason a child may have attention problems. It may be also due to anxiety, obsessive thoughts, or learning disorders. In this case, anxiety not necessarily being to the level of needing a diagnosis. The child just may be anxious and preoccupied with thoughts, worries, and fears. Obsessive thoughts, maybe your child has ritualistic and compulsive behaviors, and so their attention just seems to divert towards, or their attention is preoccupied by those compulsive behaviors. And or your child may have a learning disorder. In this case, for example, it could be dyslexia. So your child may not have an attention problem, but just may not be able to, may have difficulty focusing on academic stuff due to dyslexia, and therefore they may find frustration and divert their attention elsewhere. So just remember, attention problems does not necessarily mean your child may have ADHD, but rather there could be a bunch of other antecedents that are leading up to these attention deficit behaviors. Next slide, please. The next one would be sensory issues. You may see some thoughts that parents may have about their child with sensory issues as, my child may seem impulsive, immature, oversensitive, clumsy, or picky. But we have to remember that sensory issues come from overstimulation or understimulation. And for example, sight could be bright lights, sound could be loud noises, touch could be the way the fabric feels, like cotton could be itchy or scratchy, taste, certain flavors may be overwhelming for them, and certain odors for smell can be unbearable. So in this case, your child may seem impulsive, or show impulsive behavior, but the antecedent could be that there's something uncomfortable in the situation right now. Like the lights are too bright, and so they react to try to escape that overstimulation of light. They may be clumsy, but this could be like an understimulation of touch, where they may not have a great sense of touch, and so don't have a sense of maybe pain when they hurt themselves. Or they could be picky, and this could be like overstimulation of taste or smell, where it just feels overwhelming for them and they can't handle it, and so therefore they engage in picky behavior in what they may want to eat or may want to smell. The sensory issues are kind of like a antecedent that some parents tend to overlook, because we tend to take the five senses for granted, and our child may experience the five senses differently from ourselves. Next slide, please. And then this tends to be one of the most common behaviors that the other two antecedents usually lead up to, meltdowns. One thing we have to understand about meltdowns versus tantrums, our tantrums tend to be controlled. Usually when a tantrum happens, a child, when they get what they want, they stop crying and they can emotionally calm themselves. Meltdowns are intense emotional reactions the child can readily turn off. This means that if they were facing something that was overwhelming, or they were frustrated with something, they get this emotional heat where it comes out as a meltdown, and they show difficulty in controlling their emotions. And even if you were to concede or give them what they were wanting or remove the antecedent or stimulus, that was happening, child may not be able to calm down immediately, whereas in a tantrum they could. So one thing we have to understand about meltdowns is that the child cannot turn them off readily. And so that may be very frustrating to parents when they want their child to be appeased and be calm again, especially like in social situations like the grocery store. But one thing we have to remember is meltdowns not be controlled by the child in the moment. They take time for the child to calm down. And so responses to a meltdown could be removing dangerous objects in the area immediately. So that way, since they're not in control, they could easily hurt themselves. Do not offer rewards because that could be rewarding the meltdown behavior. And if you are doing anything and trying to calm your child, try to explain to your child what you're doing. If they are overstimulated or there's a toy that's making a lot of a noise that they don't like, explain to your child that I'm slowly reaching for the toy. I'm turning off the toy right now so the sound will stop. So that way the child can have time to process what's happening around them because they already are overstimulated. So if you're acting around them and not explaining it to them, it may cause increased overstimulation in their environment. Next slide, please. So some key questions about your child's behavior, and these are things you can ask yourself to look for antecedents that may lead to challenging behaviors. So does your child have a way to communicate with others? If they can't, they may display frustration, and this can lead to meltdowns and throwing stuff to find forms of communication. Is the environment appropriate for your child's sensory needs? Are they being overstimulated by certain lights or sounds or smells in your house that cause them to feel overwhelmed? Could your child's behavior be related to sadness, grief, or anxiety? This could kind of talk about like, is there something that's preoccupying their mind that is showing distractibility, is showing easily angered behavior, or are there medical conditions or symptoms that are causing pain or discomfort? Is your child feeling pain somewhere and that makes them irritable that you may not know about right away? So when your child is showing these challenging behaviors, sometimes we have to remember they're not doing it to make us or parents mad. It's due to some kind of need that's not met yet. And these are some questions you can ask to kind of find out what need is your child not being met with.
Great. So now we'll move on to some practical things you can do at home to address some of these behavioral challenges. So we'll go over six main steps of positive parenting practices that can really help prevent some of these challenging behaviors from occurring. So some of these really address some of the antecedents, so some of the things that happen before the behavior, and then there's also going to be some strategies that address the consequences. So what happens after a certain behavior? So in the first step, give your child choices. So we know a lot of children like to be in control. And for the most part, many children don't have that option, right? So oftentimes it's parents that are making the big decisions. But one way to really help children sort of have a semblance that they have some control is to give them control over smaller things that don't make a big difference, right? So for example, do you want your breakfast in the blue bowl or the red bowl? So it really doesn't necessarily matter which color bowl they have their cereal in or their breakfast in, but it gives a child a sense of that they're the ones that are deciding for themselves how they're going to eat breakfast. Or if there's a choice of activity, giving them that option, it can be very helpful in terms of preventing some of the tantrums or some of the challenging behavior that we may see if a child feels like they're being forced to do something that they don't want to do. So step 2, remind your child of the rules. So we know for a lot of different kinds of behaviors, there's specific rules that are learned and these become part of your daily routines, right? But for some children, they may have limited memory capacity, they may not remember, or there may be multiple steps, right? So reminding the child of the rules can be very helpful so that in the moment, they are aware of exactly what they need to do. So for example, they may try to go up the slide versus go up the stairs. So reminding them that we keep ourselves safe, so go up the steps and down the slide. And we know now with everything that's happening around us, washing hands is a big deal. It's really important that we all do this. So just perhaps reminding them that we wash our hands before we eat. So just reminding them of the rules can help prevent some of those challenging behaviors. Step 3, let your child know when something is going to end or change. So we know that this is one of the biggest challenges that many parents face in terms of, something has to change and then it's an abrupt end to something. The child was playing with their favorite toy and now they had to put it away, or they're watching their favorite show and now it's time to watch the news, right? So by letting the child know that there's going to be a change coming, it helps them prepare for that, and they anticipate that they need to wrap up what they're doing. So some things you can do is perhaps have a timer, or even just on a clock saying, okay, 5 more minutes until dinner. Or letting them know in 3 minutes you need to get dressed for bedtime. So this will help them understand that there's going to be a transition. So the activity that they're doing is going to end soon, and this can help them prepare for that eventual change and help prevent some of the symptoms that we often see with children. Step 4, and this is one of the really important things that I think generally when we're talking about challenging behaviors, we tend to forget, is that good behavior, right? So it's really important to catch your child being good. Children really respond well to compliments or to feel that they're doing well. So even just having general statements, so, wow, thanks for trying something new. Or even just letting them know exactly what they did well can be very encouraging. So sharing toys is also another big issue that we often see especially with young children, or even waiting. So we know waiting, they're not really doing anything, but it really takes a lot of self-control for many young children to wait. So really making sure that they know that we're recognizing their good behavior. So some other things that can be done. So this falls as reinforcement. So this falls more on the consequence side of the ABC model of behavior. So a consequence is reinforcement is something that happens afterwards that makes that behavior more likely to occur in the future. So these are things that we want to reinforce good behaviors, right? We want them to continue doing those positive behaviors. So reinforcement isn't just about giving them their favorite toy or giving them something. It can really, it can be very broad. And, for example, in the previous slide, we talked about verbal praise. So that can be very motivating for many children. Affectionate touch, so giving them a hug, a high five, or clapping for them. That is another way to reinforce the positive behavior that we want them to continue. Giving them their favorite toy. So for example, if we want them to ask nicely for something and they did that, we want to reward that or reinforce that behavior. So the reward or the reinforcement can be that exact toy that they were asking for, right? Or even it can be in their preferred food or drink. That can also be another form of reinforcement to help promote positive behavior. So maybe they wash their hands on time, so they can maybe have their favorite drink with dinner. Other ways to help promote positive behaviors are token economy. So these are often used more with young children, but they can also be adopted for across the age range. So, so in this example, the child is working for time on a tablet. So in a token economy, you set up a specific, if you do certain types of positive behaviors or good behaviors, you get rewarded with a star. So this is oftentimes when we think about classrooms and those gold stickers, kind of in the same way. So every behavior earns a star, or every time they do something good, they do something nice, they can earn a star. And then this is a good way to help motivate them to work towards something that they actually want. And then this can be adapted to maybe not just 5 stars, but maybe they need to earn 10 stars, or maybe this, within a day they have to do certain things, or maybe it could be, they have to do their chores during that day, and if they go through their chores, then they can earn some time on the tablet or something else that they really want to do or really like to do. So in step 5 is telling your child exactly what you want them to do. So as adults, we often think like, oh, I'll just tell my child to do this. And we may give them a very vague or very general instruction. For many young children, especially young children with disabilities, they need to know exactly the exact steps that are needed to really understand what you're asking of them, right? So telling them exactly what you want them to do. So not just, well, you can't have dessert yet, but telling them first you need to eat your sandwich, then you can eat ice cream. Or even just the breakdown of the steps, instead of saying, get ready for bed, that may be very vague and they may not really understand what that means, but telling them brush your teeth and then wash your face. So they know exactly what specific things you're wanting them to do. And then finally, step 6 is to show your child what is going to happen. So sometimes, especially with new behaviors or new activities, it may be really challenging for the child to know what is expected of them, especially if they're going into a new environment. So showing them what is going to happen or what is expected of them can be very helpful. So here we have sort of a visual storyline of a trip to the grocery store. So Dad and I go to the grocery store, we get in the car, we arrive at the grocery store, we put things in the basket that we need, we pay for them, get in the car, and we come home. So this is a very general routine, but it gives the child a sense of all the major steps that take place on this trip to the grocery store. So this can be adopted for any kind of social event or any type of activity that we're asking the child to do. And this kind of goes along with some story-based interventions that are often used for young children with disabilities or even older children with disabilities, and that's social stories. So social stories are these short individualized stories, so they're really catered to your child and in a specific situation for your child. And it really teaches them either the steps that are needed to do a certain type of behavior or what's going to happen at a specific event. And this can help prepare them so that they know exactly what's going to happen, who they might meet, who they might need to talk to, or even if they're meeting someone new for the first time. So some of the common situations that we've seen social stories with is perhaps, for example, going to the dentist. So that may be something that doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's a very there's a lot of steps that go into that. And then this can be most helpful for children who can either read the story themselves or who can pay attention to it being read to them by perhaps their parent or an older sibling. And here we have some steps that can be used to sort of create your social story, right? So, they don't have to be very complex. They're very simple and to the point. So identifying a social situation for the intervention. So what is that you want to prepare your child for? What are some specific behaviors that you want the child to be aware of? So maybe they're going to meet their grandma for the first time. So, maybe they need to, shake hands with grandma. Or maybe there's something else that they need to do. So for example, at the dentist, they need to sit in the chair. So that's something, and the chair may look different, right? So that may be something that we may need to talk to the child about so that they are aware of what exactly is expected of them. We also want to make sure that the social narrative or the social story is at the child's level that they're going to understand. So previously we had shown the different levels of communication. So if your child is only using single words, we may be using very short 2-word phrases to describe what is happening in the social story so that they can understand what is going to happen. We want to make sure that it's not too long. So depending on the child's level, then it may be a very short, maybe just 2 sentences, or maybe much longer if it's an older child and then there's a lot more steps involved. Um, a useful tool is also using photographs, pictures, or icons. So in the previous example of going to the grocery store, we had different images to accompany the specific sentence. So that way they can actually see exactly or visualize exactly what it is that they're going to do. Oftentimes photos of the actual objects can be more helpful so that the child can make that connection much more easily. And then, so then once you kind of create the story to match the child's level, then you can just read the story to them. You can practice the behavior with them. And this can be done a number of times before the event or before the activity so that they become much more familiar with it, with what is expected of them. So I'd like to open it up for a little bit of a discussion. So, so based on what we talked about so far in terms of social stories, what are some activities or events that you think you might want to use a social story for? And you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute your microphones and share if you like.
Hi, sorry, I missed the first part of this session. I was having a hard time getting a link to come on. I actually have a young one, and I'm always learning. I mean, especially with everything going on right now, you know, this is all new to him with, you know, staying at home and when we go out, the protocols. So obviously I would think that, you know, and I found one social story early on. I don't know where it is now, but, you know, just talking about why we are home and why we have to be careful when we go out and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great example. I know I've seen a couple, and we may add some links to additional social stories related to what's currently happening when we send out the slides to you all later. But I think, so one of the biggest changes I think that has happened in the past couple of months was not going to school. Right. So that was a big abrupt change that many children had to face. So having that discussion of like, why is their schedule disrupted? Why aren't they following that, you know, that the plan that they had in mind? Or, you know, why aren't they seeing their friends or their teachers or their therapists, right? So those are all great things that a social story might be helpful. And it may be something that you can then revisit with your child so that they understand that the situation is still the same and that they're not going to school, they're not seeing the same people that they usually would. So we do have some great examples in the chat. So starting ABA, he will not be going back to the school that he has been attending for 3 years. A trip to the grocery store, losing the first tooth. So that's a big event. And yeah, those are great examples. Moving to a new home. So all of these situations are things that as adults, we kind of adjust more readily, but for some children with disabilities, it may take a little bit more time. And especially if you want to make sure that they're in a good place so that they understand what's happening, and then, you know, hopefully, and prevent some of the, you know, challenging behavior that may occur. So maybe they're frustrated, they don't have their favorite toy, it's locked away in a box somewhere, or, you know, they're not seeing their favorite people, or so all of these things are really important to address with young children with disabilities, as they are observant of everything that's happening around them and they know something is off. It's helpful to be able to go over it with them so that they can understand what the changes are. So great, thank you for sharing. So next we'll move on to some resources and supports during COVID-19. So we'll go over into some things that you can do at home for yourself as well. So we know that as parents, we need to be taken care of so that we can take care of others, right? And then we'll go into some links to outside resources as well as some resources local to Texas and Central Texas. And then we'll have some time at the end for some questions. And as I mentioned before, we will be sending out the slides as well as a list of additional resources for everyone who's registered for the event. Then I'll pass it on over to Stephanie, and she will go over some tips for managing stress and anxiety.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So my name is Stephanie Soto, and I'm going to be sharing some tips for managing stress and anxiety. And I just want to reference back to Ms. Stephanie with her social story about explaining the protocols that have changed due to COVID-19. So I think it's also important for us to, manage our stress and anxiety that could be caused from all the disrupting things that COVID-19 has done. So I want to start off by sharing that it's important to keep things in perspective. Also, it's important to get the facts. It's helpful to use resources that are presenting factual information, and CDC is a great website that provides factual facts about what's actually going on. It's also important to keep yourself healthy, so make sure you get regular exercise, get enough sleep and rest, and also eating healthy foods can definitely help in that area. Another way you can practice managing stress and anxiety is using meditation to relax. Taking deep breaths sometimes helps. Sometimes we don't even think about how much we're doing and we don't even think of ourselves. So sometimes just sitting down, taking some time, taking deep breaths and just coming back to your senses helps. And then another way you can do that is doing yoga. I love it and it helps. And also, it's important to pay attention to your own body and feelings. So whether it's just talking to your peers, friends that are nearby about how you're feeling, just to get any additional support through times like this. And I'll pass it on to Mariana for other additional resources.
Hi, my name is Mariana. I just wanted to give you all some free resources that you can use, especially right now since you're at home. Some of the resources I found, for example, the first one is a link, and it gives you great resources for kids who are either in K all the way to 12th grade for different subjects as well. So it includes math, English, reading, and they're free to download, and they're also in Spanish. So you can go ahead and pick and choose. They're free to download and choose whichever ones you'd like to do. And then PCs for people, they also have free recycled PCs for low-income families. Again, you have the PDF of this presentation, so you'll be able to go to each link that you want to. And then campus technology article, that's basically an article stating where you can get free Wi-Fi, because I know some students are either doing their therapy at home or they're doing homework at home, so it's important to be able to have a reliable internet source. And then, okay, so some of the resources that I found, I thought this was really neat. So Urban Sitter is basically, it helps you find a child care. For example, if you have to leave for an evening or you're not able to stay there the whole day. And then right now they're giving 2-month free subscription for parents. I think it usually for 2 months, it's around $80, I want to say. But right now they're giving a 2-month free subscription if that's something you're interested in. School Meal Finder, that was also a really neat website. So basically for that one, you put your city and your state, and then it'll give you a list of the schools that are doing either lunch, breakfast, or dinner free for the kids. And then you're able to go to your designated school and you're able to pick up some free food. Freefood.org also has a list of pantries in the whole state of, in Texas. And then Meals on Wheels, that's specifically for seniors. So if you know any senior that right now is alone, especially because of COVID, they do provide social support and free meals for seniors. Again, you'll have the PDF for you. You have the PDF at the end of the presentation. So all of these links are available for you and they're free for you. So you'll be able to access whichever ones you're interested in.
Some additional resources that are, I guess, more specific to Texas is, and I believe this is actually across different states, but we have the information for Texan families. So this is the pandemic electronic benefit transfer, and it's basically a food benefits that families can apply for. There are specific criteria, whether or not you already receive SNAP benefits or not. And I believe the time to apply is, well, I think the application will close out at the end of this month, so June 30th. So we will include the link, and there's also a phone number in case you want more information or you're unsure if you're eligible or if you just want to learn more about the specific additional benefit for you. Something else is there's also the Central Texas Food Bank, and they're offering meal packs for families of children with under 18. So there's a list here of the different locations as well as times that they're available. But then we'll also include the link if you want to get more information, as it may be unclear to see some of the addresses on this section. And then finally, we have a list of just local and state resources that are specific for children with disabilities. And many of these sites do have specific pages that offer additional resources or supports that are related to COVID-19 and the current situation. So these are really great resources, and most of these also have information available in other languages, which it can be very helpful. So great, so we'll have, so now we have time for our Q&A. I think there had been some hands raised earlier, but if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat, or you can unmute your microphone and ask. So I want to remind people that we are recording this. So, you know, just if there's anything you don't want to be captured on the recording, and we will be making it available to others who may not have, who may have registered but may not have been able to join us today. But we're happy to answer any questions related to the topics, or if there's something else that came up as we were talking about different challenging behaviors or things to do at home, or even some of the resources, please feel free to share. So it seems like there are no questions. I did want to share a little bit more about the Aspen program. So this workshop has been sponsored by the Aspen program at Texas State University. And this is a research study that we're focusing on training or empowering families of young children with disabilities, or who may have developmental delays. So this is a parent program. It's targeted for children between 18 months and 6 years of age who may have a developmental delay. And we are currently recruiting for this study. We've had to make changes to our approach. So although before we were doing in-home visits, now we're doing virtual visits with the families. And if you are interested, you can reach out to me. I've included my contact information here below. If you have any questions, or you think you might be interested in this project. And then the initial call will involve a screening questionnaire to see if you're eligible to participate in the research study. Let's see, I think that we're having some. Okay. Yeah, we'll be including some additional resources that we weren't able to capture on these slides, as we know that there's a lot of questions about, you know, how do you continue some of your therapies that you had before, or maybe now you may be wanting to start certain types of therapy. And so there may be additional supports that may be available, or at least contact information. So is everyone in Texas, or do we have people from other states? Okay, so we have someone from McAllen. So we do have a question about racism issues. I know that has been much more recently highlighted with everything that's going on in the news, as well as this may be some experiences you may have had before. We'll be including some tips in terms of how to address these questions as young children do realize that something different is going on, or they may have experiences themselves. So there are different approaches to making sure that we're giving them factual information. We don't want to give them false information, but we want to give them information that is developmentally appropriate so that they do understand and they have a better understanding of what is going on. It can sort of provide them some of that context. So we can add that to the list of resources we'll be sending out to everyone.
Dr. Venegas, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
I noticed someone, T. Drake, you asked, should you stop your child from talking to himself? It really depends on the age. If they're young, I would say no, because they are learning language, they're expressing it. It's a good chance for them to use language, practice language. It's going on 7. I think that it's not bad that he's talking to us because he still is practicing language and using it. Maybe you could try incorporating more conversations with him, or help practice more social conversations so that way he does also gain experience in it. I think my biggest concern is he's still able to talk, but is he also able to function in social functions and meetings and interactions? That's the word I'm thinking of. Is he able to function in social interactions? If he can, then I believe that should be all right for his appropriate age level. Okay, then yeah, I don't think that it's going to be a big issue that he talks to himself. It is, like you said, it could just be imaginary play. Could just be how he like organizes his thoughts. I'm sorry, I haven't seen how your child does it, so if I'm jumping out or like reading out something, I apologize.
So there's also, so some of going off what Chris was saying was, it also kind of depends what he's saying to himself. So we know that at that age, many children are talking to themselves to walk through a certain situation, or to sort of like remind themselves of the steps they need to do for a specific task or activity. So in that case, that is developmentally appropriate in a way, as it is a way for them to sort of remind themselves of the steps that they're going through. So it really sort of depends on the content of the self-talk. But it is something that, as long as they're talking and you're engaging with them and you're responding to them, I think it's not necessarily an inappropriate thing for his age level. And I think there were some questions about the free meal program. So let me go back. Let's see. So there was the free meals for kids and teens. So this is a Central Texas food bank. So there's this one, and then there's the other one, which is the pandemic, I believe, electronic benefit transfer, which is also a food benefit for families. And as I mentioned, as long as you've been registered for this workshop, then you'll receive the additional materials, which includes the PDF of these slides with the links to these resources, as well as some additional resources that we weren't able to include here. Okay, so any final questions? So I would like to also highlight some of our funding sources. So The Aspen program is being funded by the National Institute on Disability Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, as well as Texas State University grant for research enhancement program. We do have some collaborators at UT Austin, which are listed here, and they're part of the broader Aspen research program. So I think that wraps up our workshop. Thank you so much for joining us. We will hopefully have another of the related workshop later on this year. So please stay tuned. We'll be sure to get it out to the same sources that we distributed our workshop information this time. So thank you. And you have my contact information. You'll have it on the slide if you have any other questions.
Dr. Venegas, I think we have one last question from LG Style.
Do you reward your child a snack when she is learning more activities like books, learning an ABC mouse? I think it really depends if this is something that they don't need a motivator to do, then I think rewarding them by saying great job, I just acknowledging that you see what they're doing and that you recognize that they're doing something positive. If it's something that you struggle with, that they may not be doing on their own, or that it may be one of those things where it's a battle every time you ask them to do this, then it may be having like a token economy may be a good start, but you don't want to just have them rely on that completely. You may want to then every day or every week they have to do a bit more to earn that star. So it kind of really depends on the child's motivation for that behavior. So are they already motivated? Are they already doing it? In that case, just rewarding them by saying them good job, just verbal praise, giving them a high five, just acknowledging that behavior. All right, so I think those were the last questions. Were there any I missed?
There was one from Susie Perez about his 2 sons.
Let's see.
And then there was another one, 2 more from LG Stylo 3. At towards the beginning.
One of them was asking suggestions for 2 siblings that fight.
Oh.
7 and 3.
7 and 3. Okay.
Both on the spectrum, yes.
So yeah, siblings are tricky. I think having especially for children with autism, we know that they tend to be very concrete in terms of how they process information. So one of the things you may want to try is having separate areas designated for them so that they aren't to minimize some of those conflicts, but then also having opportunities where they are doing something together to help foster some of that interaction with each other. So maybe finding something that they both enjoy. So maybe they both enjoy a certain movie, or they both enjoy a certain game, or they both have, like story time with mom. So having those shared interactions or shared activities that can really foster some of the more positive emotions, so that they recognize that they that they actually like each other, not necessarily are always in conflict with each other, but then also recognizing that they may need their own separate space to do what they want to do, that doesn't infringe on the other one's space. So those are just some small things that might be helpful to as a way to get started.
I would also say siblings, both on the spectrum, may have moments where they miscommunicate with each other. And if you could somehow break that down and explain to the other siblings of what they mean, hopefully maybe they can find a middle ground, because sometimes it is just miscommunication. Oh, both are nonverbal. I still believe that you can try to explain it to them or try to gesture certain ways that are inviting, like if they're fighting over toys. I believe you can gesture like you're sharing or try to show sharing somehow through physical interaction.
So yeah, so visual supports would also be another good way to have them be able to communicate with each other. So either having like picture cards that are, that say like, oh, I'm sad or I'm frustrated, so that they're able to communicate at least with you. So you have an idea of what they're feeling or what they might be experiencing. So those are often great resources for children who are nonverbal. I don't know if they use any other like a tablet or other communication device, but that can be another way so that they are able to communicate the frustration. So some of the things that we talked about was because of, they don't have a way to communicate, right? So what can we do to help support them, give them a way to communicate what they're feeling, and especially with each other, since they're both sort of on in that same level in a way. So yeah.
The other question is, how do you tell your child who has autism how to use the potty?
So yeah, potty, that's a big one. So we'll include a link. I know there's different approaches to potty training, especially for children with disabilities. So we'll include some links to some resources that go much more into detail on different steps to do on potty training. But with potty training, visual supports or like a visual schedule can be helpful. So showing the child exactly what they need to do, or even giving them a card to indicate to you that they need to go is are some strategies. Yeah.
The other one, Brett, how can you get ABA therapy for your child?
So that really depends where you are. If you're in Texas, there are some supports. It also sort of depends on insurance, whether you have private insurance or if you have Medicaid. But there are some, at least in Texas, I know that there are some ways that you can get it through different, through more local agencies that have either funding or can work with you to figure out the mechanism to pay for or to cover the ABA treatment. So it really depends where you are, but we can include some things that are more Texas specific, since that's where we're located, as part of the packet that you'll receive later today. So. All right, so I think we're out of time. So thank you so much for joining us. We really are happy to share and to talk with you all, learn from you all, as well as to hear about your kids. And we're very appreciative. As I mentioned, we'll be sending out the PDF with some additional resources for you all based on some of the questions that you raised later today to the email that you were registered for the workshop. All right, so well, thank you so much, and stay tuned for our next workshop. All right, bye.